Before we get started, a couple of comments I'll have, but Patrick, you had some comments you asked me.
I just to clarify, I think everybody understands this.
Sure.
So the vote next week, is based on your guys' opinion. Obviously, this is a legislative matter that you're creating zoning regulations, which is different than if you were making a decision on existing regulations on a permit, which is judicial, which is much more narrowly focused. Because it's legislative, you guys have the opportunity to base your decision on any information you find relevant. But because this decision may be scrutinized in the future, it's good to have a record of what kind of information you're considering. So what we have is from planning and zoning, the official record with all the public comments. And then if you have other information or documents that you find relevant, you as a commissioner can add them to the official record. Commissioner Bogner has provided some records, which I have made a hard copy to you guys and emailed to you, and I've also provided them to our county clerk. They will be included in the minutes for today. If somebody between now and the next meeting wants to add more documentation to the official record, you can. You don't have to, but if you had something, all of the commissioners have the right to do this. The public had the right to do this previously at the zoning level. So the public has already had the chance to offer testimony and the documents and the evidence that they did that. This is your guys' chance to supplement that. So I just wanted to mention that, make sure there are no questions. You have the hard copies, you have it by email. If somebody else send something to I would just send it to my office and I will get it to all the appropriate people and we'll include it in the minutes next meeting. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, before we get started, it's probably not really my job to say this, but this is not an issue for emotions. It's not an issue for anything but a rational conversation and logical thought on this process. I think planning and zoning has went through for the months and months to be able to present what they find in their best interest for the county. I think that ought to be weighed pretty heavy into this. And then certainly this is not a blue or a red issue. This is an issue that needs some very logical thinking and brains as we move into this and certainly get closer to a vote. So with that being said, I'll entertain some comments if we want to get started to talk about some of this issue.
They took our batteries.
Yeah, you're just
Okay, so we're okay. Well, guys, first of all, I want to make it clear that I'm not on any kind of witch hunt. We rely heavily on planning and zoning, and they do a great job on just about everything I've seen. However, I've seen a few things here recently that came up just at the very, like the night or two before they took their votes to talk. They wouldn't have had time to explore these things. And we are going to end up having to vote on, as Randy said, issues that are, how should I say, emotionally charged, depending on what side you're on and or what side of the equation you're on. But part of what I sent out or asked to be entered are these items here that you already have in your possession, and you will get hard copies by the end of the day. The biggest thing is the Hutch News June 23rd had, well, I better look and make sure, yeah, 20, had several items where they were talking about the forever chemicals in water. And I first kind of passed over it, and then I got to thinking, well, where are they getting these chemicals and stuff? And it turns out the EPA, the following month or 3 days later, came out with a whole bunch of new rules and regulations on those forever chemicals. And I think it might have affected the way the Planning and Zoning Commission looked at it. As I stated, they were on such short notice, And if they were looking at something, it would have probably escaped them because it was for water rather than solar. But the EPA regulations are pointed pretty strongly at solar and wind. And as of now that the regulations are in order, the first order of business is if you own a panel or several other items bought after 2011, you must inventory them and tell them how many you got, the percentage of those chemicals that are in those panels, batteries, whatever is consistent, inverters that are consistent with the building of a facility. And we are currently talking about enabling people to build facilities. I have an item which should already be in your, no, I left. I think, but anyway, these items that they're addressing here, I think we need to look at them. First of all, we need to look at what they're actually requiring, because there's a letter that we have, or you will have in your possession, about from their, they've hired a firm to keep them legal on items, how do I want to say it? On items where there could be contamination. And that letter, if you would read it when you get it, you probably already got it electronically. I know you have. I was supposed to get it upstairs earlier and I didn't come back with it. But it will be arriving. But they asked several questions. And in talking to their clients, first of all, first thing they said is, you've got to get this inventory in shape. The next big question was what will be allowed and how will the regulations be enforced by the Environmental Protection Agency. Apparently, from what I read in the letter, there are ways to get around the chemicals in the panels that they're concerned about. But they're going to be very expensive. They warn their clients to make darn sure you know what you're putting out there. And make sure you know what's coming down the line as far as stuff you've got ordered that's coming in. The second thing they made clear is there's probably at this point a way around that. It'll be very expensive. However, depending on what the regulations say and do, there is nothing to replace those chemicals in the inverters. You're creating DC electricity and putting it on an AC system. You need the inverters. Depending on what a EPA does, it could be about impossible to do anything with it. I mean, you can create it, generate it, for lack of a different word, but you may not be able to get it in a form that you can sell it. The other thing they were very concerned about for their clientele was any battery complexes to store the electricity. We know with the less than commercial solar that we talked about, that was quite an issue. And I know from watching the meetings it was discussed in our planning and zoning, but that was before these regulations are coming out. They say that the lithium and certain other items in those kind of complexes are not replaceable. So if they ban those chemicals, you won't have if they regulate them, it's hard telling what it'll cost because of the regulation. So that's the major things I wanted to get across. You'll be receiving a document put together that talks about the decommissioning, three items that about the decommissioning. One of them is Colorado's having to create a bunch of new regulations to get rid of the waste that's being put there. It's hazardous waste from the panels. Turns out that they gave the tonnage that the citizens of Colorado will be taxed to get rid of because the companies and various landowners, people, private people who have the panels aren't disposing of them properly. Very costly. A lot of new regulations there to handle the problem. The other has a group of different worldwide people who worked in the industry forever are having a bit of a conscience. And they're saying now that that's not my livelihood. We know there are some problems, and most of them deal with getting rid of this hazardous waste and how it will be handled. The United Nations has said some things about it. So I'm asking that you read the material and take into consideration, and it's come up, and it should. Where's the information coming from? It turns out a lot of these studies saying this have EPA and they're joint studies by the EPA and the developers. We're trying to figure out how to if they're there, how to place them correctly so they don't have lasting effects on the land. There's some information in there about tests run on the ground that have been under solar panels for 7 years, just 7 years. And it turns out that that ground loses fertility. It gets very hard and dry. So as Mr. Henry's letter from Wichita Water Department states, the water will run off of these facilities at different rates than it currently is, because it's very hard to get vegetation there, and it's a difference between having vegetation and a ground that will absorb a lot of that water in a rain event, and having that water drop on something as hard as this desk. It runs off much faster, and there are a series of tests. I've included one that it has measured that. The electrical conductivity is higher, fertilization of the land, it loses fertility, and it changes the texture of the soils to the point where you increase the runoff and it runs off it. Now, they have run tests, they know enough there on the sediment and what's leaving those panels with that water and sediment. What's really happening, Virginia Tech and a few other universities have been given, I'm not gonna enter this in the official record, but just for your knowledge, I didn't include them because it's just saying that they've been given the grants to study this over a 4.5 year period in locations all over the United States with various differences in ground below it. And the samples are pulled through the rain events automatically so that they can know what happens at the start of a storm and as it proceeds. But it's not factual, it's just saying we're gonna run the test. Or they've been awarded, and the EPA is a part of it, and several of the developers. It's not like it's a one-sided deal. And that goes to the credibility of what's being presented. And with that, I think and I trust that you all read and before our next meeting. There are a couple handouts I got here just for this discussion even, and that somebody else might bring up. I don't know about you, you just see me put my glasses on and my doctor assures me that I'm in fine shape and can see. But I have a hard time seeing those little bitty pictures. I'd like to hand you all a full-size map of both the watershed and the county. I know you just probably throw it away, Daniel, when you get it on here. Well, it won't be coming that way. And the other one, I want to give everybody, is a map of the watershed. I know discussion will come up about that. At least we can read the major roads, the county lines, how much each county has in the watershed. That's been that's just for your own reference. You can take one and hand it down. That's needed one, if you would, please.
Oh, you need one?
I think I handed mine to them. Then you get the watershed, yeah. And the ones for the watershed. Yeah, I mean, that's just for your reference. It's so easy to look down at a big picture, pick out a roadway that you're familiar with. It's not,
Don't even know.
yes. It gives you an idea of just what we're talking about, when things come up, if you handy reference. So I might tell you that there's been some speeches where they reference who owns the land, Reno County citizens. I know I watched the planning and zoning. This by far isn't you can look that up, public record over here in the courthouse. Same thing, here's the memorandum of lease, public record, anybody can go over and grab it, read it. You gotta remember, this is just a memorandum of lease. The total lease is about 25 pages. So it's not included in every document over there. Space requirement. So anyway, guys, just wanted to make you aware of that. Something that did come up earlier. And I wanted to make sure the city of Wichita and Mr. Henry's letter was included. I didn't see it included on the official record coming from planning and zoning, but it's stamped and it was received by them. And if for some reason it wasn't, I think I want to include that because much of the stuff that I've talked about and you've either received or will be receiving shortly, goes to backing up a lot of his statements. So, as Patrick sent us, you can put any amount of weight on anything you receive as you see fit. But I thought that was a pretty strong admission that as we are the ending public governance that has to vote. So the more complete information we have, probably the better we will do in our deliberations. And I thank you for your consideration.
Bill's got some comments.
So, I've looked into this a lot, done a lot of research, and I was trying to come up with some things that maybe there could be some agreement on. And so I don't know. I haven't talked to any of the groups that actually are wanting to put these solar panels in, but I know when we were out west. And we would park at like a Walmart or a shopping mall or something like that. We would a lot of times park under solar panels. And so, that seemed to me like that might be a good exception to have if we do ban commercial solar. Like I said, I don't know if it would even be a good deal for people that are installing these. Like, it would be an important cost for them, but. The ground under those is already hard. Yeah.
But John, that's a private business. Didn't we 100% vote to okay that?
Well, that's a city issue too, if you build in town where there's
Yeah.
municipality
Yeah.
that governs by that.
As far as the county's concerned, we've allowed it. It's just what the city's gonna do. I see your concern, but that comes under private.
Well,
You can put it on your business, we voted to okay that.
right. I know, but I'm talking about large scale commercial. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if they can link a bunch of these together or things like that. And you were talking about
I see
private
what
land.
where you're going.
Yeah. And so, that ground is already hard. Seems to me that there'd be less maintenance they would have to do because the business is going to maintain the parking lot anyway. And so, like I said, I don't know if it would make sense or not. But I know when I go to Walmart in 112-degree heat, parking under a solar panel might not be that bad. Yeah.
You would think that would be a plus.
Yeah.
It's a shady spot.
Yeah.
It's some of the documents I just sent you tell you that the ground underneath those solar panels, you've got a chemical reaction there, creating that electricity. Their tests have shown that it actually raises the temperatures of the ground. You would think, that's the first thing when I read it, I thought, just like you. That's a shady spot. Where do we all go? Just like you said, shady spot. But there's actually evidence that it raises the temperatures.
Raises the temperature versus being in direct sunlight or.
Raises the temperatures of the ground under.
Have you been under any to experience that?
There has been.
Yeah.
I have.
But I haven't been under any that's big enough. And single 1 or 2 panels and the wind's blowing. It's not like a big complex. And I would think that there would be some difference there. And I've made that comment earlier. There's a lot of difference between what happens in small scale or in the storm events that you'll see pictures of when you get my stuff that actually
There has been actual tests done with it regardless. Whether you want to believe it or not, there has been accredited test with regard to large scale, solar that shows a 3.5 to 7.1 degree increase in daytime temperature. Now, it does dissipate after the sun goes down. And also, it's been pretty well that it does just the opposite when there's not reflecting. That it's cooler then. And as you notice, going in town, that wintertime, it always, to me at least, it always seems colder on the concrete than it does, in the ground. But that has been actual tests done on that, regardless of what, that during a period of time during the day, and it does as soon as the sun goes down, that heat does dissipate. Now, it doesn't go very far outside of the actual solar system itself. It doesn't go a mile out or anything like that. But there has been proven the temperature rises because of the reflecting, and that makes sense.
You what?
I'm ready to talk. Are you ready?
Well,
You good? No, you still got some other?
yeah.
Well, yeah, John had jumped in there. You get,
John, have you got more?
No, I mean, that was my main thing. 'Cause-
so that was a comment on that, so he actually jumped in, so I'd like your Daniel's comments next.
Whatever Commissioner Hirst has done.
Okay.
All right. Well, I've got several items. I was a little disappointed, quite frankly, in what I heard from the planning commission with regards that there was no reference to the comprehensive plan that was developed by the citizens of the Reno County. There was no reference to the 10 factors that were involved when the decision was to send it back to the county commission. And I've got about 19 points on a comprehensive plan that I wished I would get an answer to from the Planning and Zoning Commission to justify their reasons. The general thing is that on page 21 of the comprehensive plan under industries needs to be taken into fact that GDP in Reno County is based upon agriculture, whether it's processing, production, or manufacturing. Protein needs, food needs, and then by 2050 in the world are going to be 20%. It's predicted they're going to be 20% higher than they are today. With that comes the fact of a lack of protein, which gets around to another topic later on. But Reno County and Kansas, that's our biggest. We have 5.4 billion of exports, 21.3 billion of value added with agriculture. And several places, and I'll go through these, within the comprehensive plan, it talks about the need for preserving ag land. And the next page is 25, and it talks several times in here, not just in page 25, but several times, it talks about in agricultural characteristics. It talks about the sense of place, where development should be handled. And it says there are secondary benefits to maintaining a rural sense of place, attracting tourists, offering hunting and fishing opportunities, as well as trails for hiking. But to remain a part of the landscape, agriculture must have the freedom to farm and maintain access to the land it needs to manage properly, as well as access to goods and services, market choices.
What was it? Our comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan, at page 25. And you know, that brings back to one other thing that I think the planning commission needs to consider, and we need to consider as a commission, is what place agrivoltaic will take as we go forward. And I've heard many times from the commission, from the planning and zoning, that talked about things that had gone on behind past years with oil, with our agronomic practices. We're looking forward. This is a document that's looking forward rather than back. And so from that standpoint, we today in agriculture do quite a bit of things to control. We do grid mapping on our land. And we can't afford to spend any more money than we possibly can to raise as much crops as we can. So therefore, grid mapping has come into place now. The next page was page 26, and that shows an additional, not just the Cheney Lake watershed, but it shows the not Calvary, but the Little Ark watershed that comes into the northern part of Reno County, extends on past Mueller. Let's take to page 53. These are just some of the things I'm bringing up that I want answers to from them. I feel we need answers to these before we make any real decisions and recommendation. Page 53, 6 objectives, goals and objectives. 6.1, locate all public and semi-public land uses by the service area requirements and utility demands in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Now, the comprehensive plan is not a regulatory instrument, but it's looking forward and how we look at the county. Objective 6.2, promote design guidelines and controls for public and semi-public land uses which ensure compatibility with surrounding areas, enhance the values of the natural landscape, and serve as examples of the quality of development desired within the community. Now, the other day, we had 13 people at the hearing. 9 were against solar in that area, in their area. 4 were outside of the area that were for it. 2 of the 3 votes against, 2 of the 3 people that live in a real rural setting outside of proximity to Hutchinson were in favor of the ban. Now, I'm just bringing that up because that's the comments I took. Page 54, recommendations, item 4. The county should continue to evaluate the impacts of proposed new rural residential developments concerning demands for utility services and amend its land development regulations accordingly. Within the county, not the power pool, but within the county use. That housing, but they relate a lot of times industrial development back to the housing recommendations. And page 55 in the bottom paragraph there. It says in here, it would go along with this. In other words, there are examples where implementation of proper land use planning could have benefited the landowners of today by limiting the amount of decisions that are based solely on the desires of an individual without regard to the effect on neighboring landowners. We talk about this community and sense of place an awful lot, and rightfully so. On page 56, the existing zonings has to do with the future development plan. And on page 57, it talks about the planning principles and the agricultural land use designation. Okay, and page 58 in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, 6th paragraph down, talks about industrial land uses and how it relates back to commercial land uses. '59, and goals and objectives for land use development. Objective 7.4, coordinate future development with the physical environment, placing premium upon developing in harmony with existing natural features. I bring these up just because through the comprehensive use, there are things that need to be talked at and looked at. Page 59, page 60, recommendation number 5, develop guidelines with within the zoning regulations to address future placement of solar energy generation systems. That's what we're trying to do. Page 62, at the introduction area, an implementation of land use recommendations needs to be looked at.
What are you reading from?
I'm reading from this comprehensive plan.
Does it apply to unzoned areas?
It applies to the whole county. Correct?
It applies, yeah, it's a countywide,
County.
countywide conference.
There are zoning regulations that apply just for the zoning, but this comprehensive plan was developed for the whole county.
That's correct.
And so we're clear, we're not talking about unzoned today, just zone.
Yeah, but so it does apply to some areas also.
I get that, so it'll be sidetracked here because that's another issue that improves.
Okay, you got a little. Page 64, goals for mission statement, goals for socioeconomic development. Objective 2, encourage business to approach the cities within the county for new development locations, because I think that's really good with looking outside the normal blocks area and thinking ag land. What can we do within the city? We don't have any control. Objective 6 on the next page is promote businesses, industrial development consistent with the overall quality of life within Reno County, which would benefit the county's economy and not adversely affect the environment. That goes on with it. Objective 8, also develop land use regulations and development guidelines to assure commercial and industrial development receive protection from conflicting land uses with culture. Objective 10 on the next page. Continue to evaluate the use of other economic development policies as tools to encourage new development. We don't want to shut development down, but we want to make it appropriate. Page 69. Objective 3. No information, all information needs to be developed with regard to keeping soil on a particular project location, prevent erosion, and replanting grasses on that that will conform to the extra heat generated and still allow for some production if we would look at agrivoltaic reasons, which I think might be very appropriate to tonight's areas. Page 70, objective 2. Promote design and guidelines and controls for public and semi-public land uses which ensure compatibility with surrounding areas, enhance the values of the natural landscape, and serve as examples of the quality of development desired within the community. And under goals for land use, objective 3 at the bottom of that page, minimize land use incompatibilities and ensure that adjacent developments are comparable in density and quality, thereby providing for a smooth transition between land uses. Objective 4 on page 71. Coordinate future development with the physical environment, placing a premium upon developing it in harmony with existing natural features.
Commissioner Hirst,
Yes, sir.
I think we get your point.
We're about to the back of the book.
I think we get your point that there's a number of items that you believe they didn't look at. I'm not going to remember any of this.
Well, you should be writing a book, man. I know. But, yeah, I'm just about done.
Okay.
Page 73. Has some items on there. 72, 73, land uses, land use underneath the land use at the bottom of the page. Develop guidelines within the zoning regulation to address future placement of solar energy systems, which we're trying to do. Identify high-risk areas that should be free from development. So those are the items that I looked through there that I needed answers for. I think we all need answers for to make sure they comply with a comprehensive plan to ensure that we continue to have a sense of community and a sense of place so that people can move in and feel good about it. Good stuff.
Do you have that in the form that you can send it to us?
Anything else?
Even if you just take a picture of your notes.
Yeah, we could do that. You know. Would that suffice?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like to do that, that'd be fine. And
There's
then
a page number in the article.
if you included me on that email, then I would love to just put all this into the record. The reason I like to do that is, 4 or 5 or maybe a year, maybe 10 years from now, people might look back and see what the discussion was, and that would be useful.
The 10 factors that I do want to talk about. Four points that I pull out of there. Preservation of good ag land. Promote general welfare, sense of place and community. 2 of the 10 factors. Third one is compatible to other land uses in area, neighborhood. Does not made necessary due to changing conditions. So those are some of the items that I particularly thought about in my research. I'm done.
Mr. Friesen. Is the question for staff, Article 1-103, that's the boundary of which the planning commission has suggested that no commercial solar energy systems be placed. What is that boundary?
The jurisdictional boundary of the current zoning, the fully zoned area of the county.
So the planning commission's recommendation is to prohibit commercial solar energy in all zoned areas.
No, that was not the planning commission. That was the commissioner's direction, and the planning commission denied that.
So I'm looking at the document. It's highlighted in yellow. It says no application or conditional
Yeah.
use permit shall be considered. Page
14,
18.
Yeah, that was the proposal the county commission wanted us to have a public hearing on. We had that public hearing, and then the planning commission denied that text amendment.
So why is it in the packet?
That was the proposal.
Well, don't, just give us the one that we're supposed to be deciding on. Don't give us the one that we're not deciding.
So for the actual meeting where it's a business agenda, staff, Mark's and I are writing up a resolution, 2 different resolutions to clarify what you're voting on. There'll be a resolution that will allow commercial solar and a resolution that doesn't. And so in those resolutions, massage some of these procedural things so that people don't make it so that we don't get caught up in a cumbersome motion. So you could either choose A or B at the meeting, at the next meeting. I understand I understand what you're saying. And we want to avoid some sort of weird technicality, so it'll be clear there'll be a resolution that
Well, I
The opposite.
pulled up the study session back, and this is what is in there.
I believe what the planning commission did was make a recommendation. I think they made a recommendation in opposition, the opposite recommendation to what they thought they were getting.
So all in the yellow except for 8 is recommended?
Yes. The other 4 text amendments were recommended for approval. This one was recommended for denial because it has to do with the commercial prohibition.
And that's how we'll do resolutions, because that recommended for denial is such you can get into a double negative situation quickly, so.
I know, but the packet doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I misunderstood the same thing, so you're confused me as well.
Okay, I respect and appreciate the certain commissioners' efforts to provide new evidence. I'm not particularly swayed by that. And here's what. I mean, go to Google and refute everything that you provide. And you can go to Google and support anything you want. These fluoropolymers, these forever chemicals, if you, Commissioner, you said, they're in inverters, they're taking them out of the panels. Let me read you where they're also at. They're in
Non-stick surfaces you fry your eggs on.
they're in healthcare, medical devices such as tube and catheters. They're in construction items, outdoor furniture, playground equipment. They're in industrial manufacturing, things like line pipes, water pipes, valves, pumps, reactor linings. They're in the food industry, food packaging, beverage dispensing, industrial bakeware, home cooking, aerospace, telecommunications. They're in our cars, vehicles, airplanes. They're everywhere.
Yes,
So maybe we should just ban them.
some states have.
I don't think that's possible, but if
They're going to find out it's not possible.
if the reality is those are dangerous, then we need to go to the source and deal with that, not single out some industry. I think that argument I don't think holds any weight, because you're not addressing the problem, you're just using the argument to kill off, this particular type of project that people want to do in the county. So I'm not swayed by the forever chemicals thing. I don't like it. They don't sound very good. And, but it's not a really great argument because they're everywhere. And they're going to be, if it is a thing, they're going to leach into our water supply everywhere. And it doesn't matter whether it's everywhere. So like that, it just renders the whole argument moot.
Not necessarily. Daniel.
What? It's everywhere already.
It is, and that's why this new set of rules that just came in last month is being initiated by the EPA.
Well,
And we don't know.
in my time, I don't really trust the EPA that much anyways. They have a lot of rules that create a lot of burden for government that don't always make a lot of sense. As Mayor Bueller, we had to take arsenic from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. So the point is, it's already here. We have to deal with it. We're going to deal with it as a whole, and singling out a certain industry just because they use it isn't fair. That's my point. So,
I might comment there, the reality of it is more of that gets buried in the dirt, leaches out, than these probably ever will. I'm just gonna throw that in there, because they're completely sealed. And I have firsthand knowledge of seeing what happens to them when they get broke by hell balls this big. And it never penetrated the center.
well,
And the technology is different, but I'll elaborate on this momentarily.
yeah, and like, again, if it was an issue, we'd be seeing it. I mean, maybe it is in our water and we just haven't tested it yet.
Well, that's what brought the EPA deal.
I'm just saying it's everywhere already. Like, the problem already exists. This particular industry should not be singled out. You would basically, if you're taking your argument, you would have to take it further and say, we're not gonna allow any more pipes to be installed, we're not gonna accept any more vehicles to be here, because they're all going to leach out the same things, and we're not going to do that. We're just leveraging this argument to kill this particular type of projects. I don't agree with that. I continue to struggle with this idea that, we're very, conservative Republicans that, believe in property rights and everything else. We won't want to tell farmers what to do, except for when they want to make more money on their land, perhaps make a profit for the first time in their generation by leasing the property. I think the argument that this is going to take vast amounts of ag land, I think, isn't substantiated. I haven't seen that anywhere in the state where these things are creating incompatibility. They take up a few square miles at best. And it is really like the most abundant source of energy that God has given us is the sun. We ought to be figuring out ways to utilize it. And this is part of the process. It gets better if it's installed in a way that, over time you realize it's bad for the environment. We fix it. Like, you can't innovate and get to better levels of technology without taking a few risks. And for a couple commissioners to just inject a whole bunch of confirmation bias based evidence to sway it, it's just not going to sway me. I think this is not, we're not building 100 square miles of solar. We may not build any, right? We don't know. We can stop it at any time. We ought to let the free market deal with some of this stuff and not believe the sky is falling. We did it with wind, and I do agree, that's much more obtrusive in the area they wanted to put it. Were some good arguments there. This is not obtrusive. The only, argument I think that's worth debating here is the environmental part and the forever chemicals thing. I don't know how you can argue that when it's in everything. It's all over here already. So I don't agree with that. Commissioner Hirst, question for staff. Commissioner Hirst has suggested that you didn't look at the comprehensive plan. You didn't look at, the way we wanted to plan the county. You threw that to the wind. Is that accurate?
Don Bogner, Director of Public Works and Director of Land and Zoning. When we're deciding whether you're going to prohibit something or not prohibit something for a viable land use, that is not looked at then. It's like it's like maybe it's possible somewhere. When an application is applied for a permit, then it goes before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and all that comprehensive, which is valid what you said, is looked at then. When that project, where they want it, does that fit the comprehensive plan, safety, location, whatever, that's when it looks looked at, not now.
Okay, so Don, what you're saying is, all we're doing today is saying, we're not saying no, but we're not saying yes either. right?
You're just saying it's a possibility. And when an application is made, it'll go before the planning and zoning, and they'll look at all that and make a recommendation
So,
at the
I
end.
mean, essentially what the planning commission is saying is, say, you know, at least listen to an application. Doesn't mean that we're approving any application. It's simply saying, don't on its face say no. Take the time to review the individual facts and then apply the comprehensive plan.
That's true.
So I think Commissioner Hirst,
I disagree with that.
you're like, the whole point of the plan is to use it when somebody applies and then use that to say yes or no. You don't say no without listening to the reason. They may have technical answers to every point you guys are making. And they have, you know, this is part of like, you know, like very fundamental, like constitutional rights, including the, you know, opportunity to defend yourself, to use your, you know, property the way you want. You don't give any of that opportunity. Like, you've taken it all away. Property owners haven't even got the chance to, like, you know, say why this fits in the plan, say why it's not gonna harm the environment. Like, this is essentially a step too soon. All of these arguments you can make
I disagree with
as
that.
soon as the application comes, and we will have the same conversation again. All we're saying is, we're not gonna deny it on its face and not even listen to what somebody may want to do.
I would disagree with that, because we have to know some of these things in order to decide whether it's appropriate or not as a whole. Not just one project. We have to decide whether this is something that enhances, not just the whole concept, not just a project.
But you slam the door. Like, there's no conversation, there's no opportunity for somebody to say, hey, I think I can use my land in an appropriate way. It's compatible with the county's plan. It's environmental and friendly. You're not even willing to listen to that. You've already, you know, made your judgment that it can't.
Based
Across the entire county, across all applications.
based upon what's already in effect today.
I mean, with all due respect, you're not an expert. I am not an expert on this, and I can't rely on your opinion as expertise to say this is such a significant issue that I'm not even going to listen to any applications for them, and simply just say no. Like, I can't rely on your expertise.
What I'm basically saying is I don't have any trouble with planning and zoning commission developing those rules and regulations.
We kill these guys, and we're going to do this anyways. Again. Like, just let an application come through, and then we can do this whole thing again. You can present everything you want to present, and all. Correct me if I'm wrong, but all we're doing today is saying, will we listen to applications, or are we going to slam the door and never listen to any application?
We're here for the sole purpose to hear what's on each commissioner's mind, I believe, but also ultimately to reach out to the next meeting, whether we're gonna vote to deny it completely or give it over to zoning, and then you're correct, we'll address these issues later on. Am I correct in that, that quick?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Friesen is correct in that it would come in with if it was allowed in the zone area, then they would still have to go through the conditional use permit process, where a developer would have to answer a lot of the questions that you guys were discussing today, and that's why I'm making some notes in terms of if that ever came up, some of the things that we would require to be part of the conditional use permit. The only slight, the conditional use permit is not quite as legislative, because then at that point you really have to scrutinize the exact use, and can't be quite as, theoretical, making it denial, but other than that, everything's fine.
You see it on consent agenda all the time. It can be pulled out the guts.
Yeah, I don't think it's solar, commercial solar probably would get on consent agenda.
I know, but I'm just saying, I mean.
But you're right, I mean, yeah,
We
but
could
for-
scrutinize any one of them, we don't.
There are probably things that are on our consent agenda for permits today that, 30 years ago might have been controversial. I can't think of an example, but that's just how things evolve.
Okay, thank you.
You get it.
Yeah, I think when you read some of this stuff, and Daniel, I agree with you. I thought exactly like you do. It's everywhere. But what brought on these particular regulations that were enacted last month, and yes, the letter I put in is their people talking to their people, the developers, on conditions that they see they may have a problem with. That guy creating the nonstick pan, I'm sure somebody's talking to him about what are you gonna change to if, just like this letter, if EPA decides that you're not gonna, we've got one state that has banned these chemicals, like you said. I don't believe they realize how far and deep it is. But what originated the first process, and this is a 180 degrees from what EPA normally does. I've read recent articles on other chemicals where they have banned them. And the bottom line is, they were asked in the article why they didn't do something like this, proactive. They said it wasn't their job. The studies were done by the agency who allowed the chemicals. We come in and clean up. That's what's so monumental about this. The EPA has decided that it's a lot cheaper and better to prevent something. This is the first major issue where they've taken a proactive stand rather than a reactive stand. And that's why it struck my mind as something we should discuss. Right or wrong. You've got your opinion, I've got mine, but there's one other item that hasn't come up. And it was addressed by slightly by planning and zoning. They elected to use the exact same language that's in about interfering with communications and GPS, and which comes to Ron's statement on what are you doing to your neighbor? If my planner doesn't work because my GPS doesn't work and you admit it in your contracts, then you've infringed upon me.
But
And
it's anecdotal. There's no evidence of that.
there is.
You're just saying it could happen.
It does. If it's not going to happen,
I've never heard of interference from agricultural GPS use in solar. Like,
it's in their contract. If they're not worried about it, why put it in the contract? If you ask them to drop it from their contract, they won't. So apparently there's a reason they want it there. And that tells me all I need to know is they know they've got a problem. I have talked to people who worked in and around these, and certain functions of their machines do not work. And
again, it's anecdotal. You get somebody here that's an expert and they tell you facts.
well, we've been over that, so I don't need to go back over those points taken. Cut you off, but you've already made those points, and so continue to hash.
Beyond the conversation's been had today, I just have to be completely honest. I came to office with a completely different opinion of this subject. It's been going on since before I got here. And having been here and had exposure to a lot of the same literature we shared here today on both sides of it, I've also seen literature on the side of it where they have tested this and looked at the particulate that comes out of these, if in fact the new ones are going to shed any at any great rate. And I've seen studies both ways. I have to concur with Daniel on the fact that you can go find anything you want to. In fact, Mr. Hirst, you made a comment in the meeting one day, and I turned and asked you. You said it depends upon who pays for the study. That's completely correct. It could go either way. You can find anything you want to if the money trail goes that way. And so it's difficult in this day and age to believe things. It's difficult to believe the news. It's difficult to believe what's going on. I didn't even watch the debate last night, believe that. But how in the world would you know who's telling the truth anymore? With AI technology and all the other stuff going on, it is absolutely feasible that a lot of this stuff is blown completely out of proportion. Maybe it's not. I don't know that. But I, through the course of being here, in my heart, can't come to a logical conclusion that there's enough evidence to tell people they can't have this. Having come off of 3 county town halls that are, we're not talking about the end zone today, but there were some there that were in the zone areas that came to those meetings, and then there was a lot of good conversation come out of that. That I come out feeling completely different. I've seen the studies, both sides of it. I personally have solar systems that are out there I operate, not at a grand scale, but I told you I've seen hail balls the size of softballs hit them, and it didn't get to the second layer. It took out 3 out of 6 on one of them. There was some on the other side. It's amazing to me it didn't just pelt everything. And it would in a big field. But the other side of that is, having talked to people in industry, which I called and visited with, that installs this stuff every day, 100% of those panels is recyclable. Secondly, they had provided studies because their customers have this same question. What if I put this in? How am I affecting the environment? And they have information there as well that could offset this information that says that it's not dangerous. There's enough evidence to say the pollution in the world is caused by a greater source. I mean, I looked at the watershed. I'm going to jump around here. I looked at the watershed. I appreciate that. In fact, I asked Don if he'd give me, and you got them, and I appreciate you bringing them. So I love to see something in real time that I can see a map where it's at. But it's almost completely irrational to say we're going to take it out of the Cheney watershed when the county, in fact, is almost all Cheney watershed. It's rational to have a conversation to let these people, after the development of the months and months and months, to go into a conditional use permit and rationally look at what would be a great setback, what would be an area that would have with this study right here, Ron, that would affect development, and we don't want to do that. Maybe perhaps around Cheney Lake we want to go 3 to 5 miles around it. I had a conversation with somebody that said that they were putting fence posts in 3/4 mile from the lake, and they shoved it in water. A comment come up that, what about the treatment on that pole you shoved in the ground that's leaching into the water? I mean, you can look at everything that could pollute or not pollute, but it comes down to that thing we did. What do we look at logically? That's kind of why I made them comments today, that is the right thing for people. We can't look at it with personal or emotion, because I've seen some of that today already. It affects my farm, it affects my ground, or it affects that person in a negative way. We all know full well there's people in town that have farm ground outside of town and have an interest in that. Interesting, I had somebody share an article with me on Kansas Farmer, how to cohabitate with solar panels. They can be elevated at such a height that you could farm under. I'm not completely sure that I buy into the ground not growing. When you drive past the field out here on Broadacres Road, they don't mow because it's growing up the bottom of the panels. I mean, there's vegetation growing on them even in rain. At that small scale, we ought to see exactly what we're talking about. I don't see it. But if I'm worried about what's going to get into the water and how that's affected, especially Wichita, this letter that I guess I've never seen, I've heard about. I have seen it. I don't have a copy of it. But in fact, it's interesting to me, and I'm going to ask that question next Monday at lunch. Why and what conclusion did you come at over in Wichita to regulate solar and not ban it? I'd like to know what their comments are in that, because that might greatly affect what I think as well. I'll probably talk to Mr. David about that. I want to know what you come up with that makes you think you don't want to ban it. And besides that, if you want to have solar over here, why are you worried about us putting it in the water that's about to run out in Cheney Lake? I know that's a poor comment, but all the stuff that runs off the fields and the other tributaries that hit that lake is probably far greater than any of this. I fully believe God created an earth that is capable of cleaning us up. It cleans up the sewage that we put into it. There's far greater risk probably with the nitrates coming out of each individual sewage system at everybody's house. I talked to somebody who was on a state water board that had stated they took a position years ago that if you put a garbage disposal on them, it creates nitrates in it. Don't without it. It's not a huge problem. That creates an extensive more amount of nitrates than it does without. So we shouldn't have any garbage disposals in the county either. We're gonna knock door to door and get rid of them. I mean, everything is a contributing factor to this. When you talk about being careful about consuming something that's harmful for you, how many people brush their teeth once or twice a day? It's full of fluoride. It's full of chemicals. It's full of detergents. So that's not good for you. Fluoride's a heavy metal, just like these metals. It goes right to your brain and causes Alzheimer's. So where do we stop it? Where do we use the sensibility? Chlorine in the water, that's not good for you. I mean, I'm not for having coming out of them town halls that changed my opinion completely about coming over here on this side. I'm not about, personally, this is for me, doesn't mean you guys change your mind or do what you want. I'm not about telling people they can't develop something that, and anybody that knows me knows I'm not a go green guy. I'm not a save the planet green energy person. I just assume we drill for more oil because I think there's God's plenty there, will never run out. But I think it is a viable option for this county and other counties to do that. Reading how some farmers are cohabitating with it. I understand the outside concerns with that and the aesthetics, but I put full trust into our planning department of what they've developed and what they will do with it in light of these regulations as well, Mr. Hirst. I think that they can do a great job of presenting a case for letting somebody do it in the proper manner with setbacks and in the type of system and out of development areas, that kinds of things. I think full well that they'll look at. And I think possibly we're missing some economical dollars here that would help. And this county needs them, quite honestly, like every other county does. And the bottom line is, we heard a huge body of people that said, I don't want you infringing upon my freedom. Why would I do that to them? I don't think that I have the authority nor the integrity to intrude on somebody's field if they decide they want a wind generator or they want a solar panel in it. Wichita did something like developed a mile apart. I think that's a great thing to do. I did hear that portion of it on the news, but I've greatly changed my opinion. I agree I don't want chemicals going in anything, but I know full well that I've talked to some in the industry and then I've watched the videos of the new panels that they create where it's impregnated into them. It's not on it, that it barely comes out of. And so I don't find an arguable point that we should ban it, but maybe take precautions with it. But there's a whole lot of people that want it and there's a whole lot of people that don't. But I would guess that if we could put them in a room, the ones that want it outweigh the ones that don't. We've had a loudspeaker in the southeast corner of the county telling the rest of the county what they want to do. I honor what they want to say and what they want to do, but I don't think they dictate the majority that's north of them in a zoned area. That's just my opinion. I've heard from both sides of it. The comment come up a little bit ago about people in the city making a comment or people not in that zoned area making a comment. This kind of decision affects the whole county's economy. If it's developed and it puts something back into it. Their point was, if it is developed and somebody wants to do it, couldn't that put back into the economy and defray some of the taxes? Yes, it could. And at what cost? I don't know. I gotta be honest with you. I don't know whether there's an issue there or not. And I'm not necessarily taking a position on the chemical or no chemical, but I don't find in my heart where I could vote this down. I really don't, to be honest with you. Because I don't find it an arguable point. I had more points than that in my head last night. I wrote down, I'm not even gonna go to it. But I think that's why I said at the beginning of this meeting, let's enter this thing with not emotion, with no political view, with unbiased, with a rational mind. And I remember clear back in my campaign, it's interesting that everybody that runs today uses that slogan. I'm coming in here with sensibility. I want to use my senses to do what I think is right. I even hear Trump saying that now. And I'd never heard it before. Not that it's original, but that's how we rationally look at things. What I do in my conscience personally to God and to people is the way I try to operate as a commissioner, because I think that's the best thing to do. And I'm not going to support ban, I can tell you that. So we're going to have to look at something that viably regulates it probably in the future. So that's my position. I'll leave it on. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we say go with the planning commission. at that point, we have absolutely no rules or regulations to even start. Because we called a halt to that while we had local vendors or local individuals who wanted to go. We stopped them from looking at this, the commercial, focused on the others that wanted something done right away in this county for their businesses, county businesses. That's where we went. So if this thing is voted to, as it sounds, we have absolutely no rules and regulations. Do we continue this rules and regulations deal? Or do, I mean, because we kind of just hauled it and went over to what was pressing and what the local individuals want and addressed those first.
Is this, if you,
And now we're into addressing this.
like, if you vote to not prohibit large-scale solar in the zoned area county, then it will go back to the planning and zoning commission, and they will have to create regulations.
That isn't an area where the government makes a mistake a lot. It's like trying to solve, like, these are very unique individual based case projects. And like there are fundamental things, like breaking environmental law that you don't have to read. You don't have to put that in a regulation. I'm sure it's in there. But, like the points that Commissioner Hirst, again, I'm not disagreeing with your points, I'm disagreeing with the timing. So all of that, like, and this is what I advocated in wind for a while, and it just didn't really take hold. But these are such complex, unique projects that I think it's a waste of time for the planning commission to get so precise. It's just gonna, this myopic view. Well, it's just we're gonna be here for years trying to figure out exactly how to build a commercial solar system, solar array. In years, I guarantee you. Just set some basic guidelines, apply what you said, Commissioner Hirst, the comprehensive plan, and then allow the commission to negotiate individual terms, which it can do, right? And it's, what is that called? The agreement that
Well,
negotiate.
a conditional use permit which I'm assuming you're talking like a couple steps from where we're at now, but someone would apply for a conditional use permit with a development agreement and maybe some other supplemental agreements for something
The
like that.
development agreement is where you really get to negotiate.
And it has to be done at the same time that the CUP is done.
Yeah, so when the commissioners were voting, the plan committee, with a CUP, you would have this is very broad. The CUP is like Commissioner Friesen thinks you're trying to say. This is what we'd have information such as what we might know, even the technology being used, where it's going, and what their plan is to mitigate some of these concerns. That would all have to be identified in a document that you guys could do.
I'm just saying, like, I mean, I can see where this is going. I think there's 3 commissioners that are gonna be okay with this. And we're gonna kick it back over to the planning commission, and we're gonna go back and forth and tell them one thing, and they're gonna send it back, and we're gonna say, we don't like that. It's gonna do just like we did for wind, like, keep it simple regulations, and then let the development agreement be where you really refine.
At that point, if it actually, we did that way, I don't know if legally we can, but at that point, if we just left it and they brought us back to conditional use permit, and it's kind of like the church out there, we didn't like the fence in front. I know it's in a grander scale, but they brought it to us and that was our regulations and we wanted the fence gone. The fence is gone. There could be at that point some critiquing of it, could it not?
I agree with all.
Instead of just totally tossing this whole thing out the window.
I mean, I believe the planning commission will bring you guys some good, you don't want to leave it completely vague.
No.
You would like to give developers some good ideas of what you're looking for and what you're concerned about. But ultimately, it comes down to any conditional use permit, which if you look at the planning commission, if you look at our zoning regs, there's like 20 different things that require a conditional use permit, some of which are more controversial than others, but they're all kind of unique uses that have to be, that you really can't evaluate the right place to put I'm going to say racetrack, because that kind of was there's good places for these things and not good places, and you really can't evaluate them until you know exactly what's being proposed and where it's being proposed.
But if you put, like, you put simple, like, if we ask for simple guidance, at the very end it says, and subject to final approval of a development agreement by the commission, you essentially have a full veto capability at the commission level.
I would agree with that.
Both of those has to be done at the same time. Now, with the regulation we were getting,
Am I wrong now?
CUP, development agreement, it's the same.
Yes.
That
Conditional
doesn't,
use permit has to
that's
be
not
done.
what they're saying.
No, like change it.
So we're going to be contingent on him getting it. Sorry.
What do you say? Is it?
Oh, we're kind of, it's a little bit mechanical. Don, you might address that?
I don't say you want to likeness.
Well, when somebody applies for a permit and it goes to the planning zoning commission and the zoning commission says yes, provided you follow these regulations, and that comes before you and you agree with that. Then, after the company gets this permit and it's okay through you guys, then the development agreement comes.
Wasn't that changed? I thought that was changed. I thought I read in there where it has to be done in the new.
You don't need a development agreement until an application is approved.
Then we don't have to sign the development, right?
You create it. You create it.
Right.
They have a big permit, and we're like, we don't like the terms, we're not signing.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're getting the schematics kind of in the way of things, because I think what you're right. I mean, they get a permit, but they still require them to get a development agreement that we agreed on. So at the end of the day,
So it's still,
they may not happen simultaneously, that may not be accurate, they'd both be required.
it's still gonna come here, at the end of the day.
You have final approval on everything.
Right.
Again, I think the point you're making is that both the permit and the development agreement would both have to be approved before anything went into the ground. That's the important one. I think.
Well, I mean, the emphasis I'm trying to make is that there's a significant amount of discretion in the development agreement. And that's where you solve like all of the individual points, and I'm not gonna be around when you guys deal with this next year.
Well,
I'm just saying, don't,
but even looking back,
just don't force them to solve an equation that they can't solve,
well, even looking back at through all the minutiae of what happened with regulating limited scale and talking on residential, it was back and forth and back and forth. And I just, that's a terrible tragedy, a waste of time if it comes here at the end of the day and we can critique it at the end. I somewhat agree with that.
I've been part of the problem, I admit.
Why didn't we bring it up?
It's been unfair and not what we should be doing with our planning commission. It's battling back and forth and part of it is that we're trying to figure out an application that doesn't even exist. And that's impossible through regulation. And that's fundamental mistake the government makes. They try to create infinite rules to solve all of the issues that don't even exist. So let's please not do that.
So where and when are penalties determined for companies, like if they produce too much runoff, or what stage is that?
So, yeah, and when you get a conditional use permit, focus on the word conditional. It's literally saying, you have permit to do this, and as long as you follow whatever those conditions are. If at any time they are no longer complying with the condition, so a condition could be runoff, is what you're suggesting. If they're found to not be in compliance, then they have their permit revoked. If you, on these projects, when they put this significant capital into them, the threat of doing that, which means the county still controls that, we'd have to legally prove that they were violating it, obviously, because that would be subject to a lawsuit. But if they were, they would lose their whole project and have to be removed. It would be very similar to like I filed suits against people for having a junkyard in the wrong place. It'd be the same thing, but their risk would be huge, so they would have a lot of incentives for buying that.
Well, I mean, in that case, they would have possible contaminants from oils and gasolines, and if there's any contaminants in that conditional use permit or following that is the time when you would put in that being responsible for ground cleanup.
If you look at some of the
If you
development,
wanted to put that in.
some of the development agreements, other counties who've gone forward with this and Kansas other places, they require the developer to propose, or they work with them, the agreement requires some sort of environmental monitoring to happen, usually by a third party, right, or something like that. And so you can, that's one way to solve
Well,
it.
you can add indemnity, right?
Yeah.
In that agreement, you can make them post a bond.
Absolutely, cleanup bond and a
Like, all
decontamination
this
bond.
stuff, I think, I'm trying to emphasize, I want to make my mark here before I leave. Don't, let it come to you at the right time. All of these things that you're arguing, they're very circular until you actually have a project. Get a project in, sit down with the developer and you say, I'm concerned about, forever chemicals. I'm concerned about cleaning things up. And you need proposal language that handles all that before we're gonna execute any development. That's where the granularity of you protecting our county should come in. Don't make the planning commission figure that out. It won't. It's impossible.
I've worked before on wind projects on a cleanup bond, which is one of the ways you can protect the county and the landowners, is to require them to put up security so that if the project needs removed or if it's contaminating, then you don't have to ask them to do it. You have the financial ability to just do it. So there's ways to solve for this.
Yeah, and these concerns are valid. They're reasonable. You just bring them with the developer.
Where do these panels go? There's something here for this.
If, I made a note, that could be somewhat thing we built into our development agreement, because I think one thing I've heard from that concern is we wouldn't necessarily we would not want them to show up at our landfill all at once, especially if they're in their pre-recycled state or something. But I think we could solve for some of that.
On a smaller scale, that couple of them that I talked to, they actually, if there's metal on the outside, and they recycle that, the glass goes into recycling. And the others can actually be transported, sealed and transported off to where they'll strip the materials off of it and use it again. So, but that has to, that'd be great.
I think that's something we
If they're
require.
damaged.
I bet if we looked, and you set out, we're gonna throw 10,000 panels in the landfill, and you compared it to how many forever chemicals already exist there, it's probably a drop in the bucket. There's gotta be so many forever chemicals in our landfill.
Go ahead, more. I don't, there's no reason we take anything level as a potential.
I'm just saying,
We have a landfill.
we need context when we're making these arguments. How many electronic devices have been thrown away that equal one solar, development? I bet we've had multiple of them.
No, I think we could require them to remove the PFAS.
It sounds like they're recyclable.
I think they.
Yeah,
Make them recycle.
it's very expensive to recycle.
Yeah.
If we can make them recyclable, I think.
Some of what I provided, that's the issue. They're saying it's cost prohibitive to recycle, even start with new material. And until you either put legislation in that forces it and creates a higher price for everything, for the building of a new one, if you're gonna recycle or wherever you're gonna use that stuff, the reason it's not commonly done is there's no money in it. The labor outweighs the end result. And until that changes in some manner, either by legislation that they must be on a state level or whatever, probably never happen.
But that's their starting position, right? Like if it was that you really want to build it here,
We're so enthralled over a system that's only maximum 20% efficient. Well, we've got some things coming on down the line, such as fusion, that may make this completely obsolete.
then by that time we'll figure, like Commissioner Park said, by that time we'll figure out how to take care of the environmental problem. It's like, yeah, trust and innovation come a long way.
We just appropriated a bunch of money to correct an environmental problem that's been in our air for 50 years because they buried chemicals. And there was no regulatory EPA or anybody to say, you can't bury that hazardous material here. We're spending money today that we shouldn't have to spend. Some of the stuff that I sent caused in the question that you've got to clean this stuff up or you don't. And part of their fix is if your water has these chemicals in, which is why this regulation came into play, you got a choice. There are ways to clean it up, but they'll be so expensive that the federal government's going to have to help local government to do it. And the other side of it is when they do get it cleaned up, if they can't clean it up, is just what we're dealing with down here. We're going to get you a different source of water. And that's what happened.
Yeah, the difference being today, we can be proactive on that issue, I think, and the protections we talked about. It's much different than back in.
We have visibility on what's going on. Nobody knew what's going on back then.
And this is new enough. Do we know what we should? I mean, and I agree. Help petroleum. There's problems there. Shit, I've cleaned up so many places, and they figured out a way to legally get around our Kansas laws.
Well, you can
legally.
have conversations about,
We can go on and repeat that forever, but
I mean, I'm not, what?
farm operations.
They're pretty closely regulated.
So one thing that's not exactly related to this, but I noticed when I was reading this, and I think it was number 14. In this document it says that we regulate churches. Is that something that we want to reconsider at a future meeting?
we regulate what?
Churches?
That's not really the study session.
No, but I was just, since we're all here and since it's a public meeting, I figured when we were done, I think we're done with that, I figured I'd ask.
As far as building regulation?
Yeah, no, like, if you scroll, I think it's number 14, if I remember correctly.
Keep going way up.
I get you.
It's under the condition.
Your point, Commissioner Whitesel, but
Right, really, later now, go back down.
I've always
Number
seen,
4, keep going down.
always seen church used
Keep
to
going.
be pretty flexible. I mean, we can put them
Right
near
there.
residential areas.
Number 9. So,
I've never seen any,
Number 9.
because I've never heard of it being a problem.
yeah,
Maybe not.
power.
To what degree do we regulate those?
Power to regulate
Do you
is the
mind?
power to destroy.
It's conditional
Real
use for
briefly.
that. I mean.
Just sit back
Because
there,
we are,
Joel,
yeah,
the normal.
I mean, it's setback, but it's a land use that is not residential or not agricultural in nature, so the way our regs are set up, it's a conditional use permit. Yeah. Church.
You're not trying to be intrusive on the church operation.
Don't look at it as a church. Look at
I
it
know, and I'm
as
looking at it as a
building.
commercial building because it is what happens in a building.
Absolutely not, yeah.
It's a building.
But they still have to have the same setbacks, the same grades.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're not regulating necessarily the
And obviously,
activity.
we nipped part of the last one, but we didn't like.
Right.
That's-
I don't know. It just seems like the power to regulate. I mean, that's why you can't tax the church is because the power to tax it's the power to destroy it. And so, I'm just wondering if there's an appetite to maybe not regulate churches.
Let's bring that up at a later date.
And so then, we could put it as a permitted use by right if we wanted to, but it's text amendment.
I'd hate to go there, John.
And that's why I asked.
Basic.
Are we done with the before we're going further, are we done with the comments on solar?
Yeah, it doesn't seem
Because
like
we're gonna
there's
sit here all afternoon and I'm gonna cut it off if we're done with the comments for solar, let's move on. And then you guys can debate heavy.
I guess in answer was something with regard to regulations. If I'm gonna build a building,
All right, I think we're done with solar, right? Did we say that?
I'm getting to this, that if I'm going to build a building, I'm going to have all the specifics involved in building that building, or I'm creating a real mess and I'm very expensive to build. And so I don't know why that is much different than in business coming in and doing solar.
It's not. I mean, nobody's
not.
arguing.
It's not, but it's a church building, you're not regulating building codes, just setbacks and that, so that's all.
That varies.
I'm not talking about buildings, I'm talking about the concept that you have those regulations completely in place, just like you have a building plan completely in place.
Nobody's saying we're not gonna regulate solar. We're not gonna say no on its face. It's all,
But you were talking about going back and forth, and I
well,
that was
I
relationship.
think like, hopefully you win your election, you're here another 4 years and you can deal with it. Just don't do what we did before. For planning, I don't know, I can't even, I'm surprised they stick around as much as we kick stuff back and forth. I mean, they work harder than we do.
Well, that's my closing comments, is I appreciate the work you guys put into this, I appreciate all the work you put into all of the stuff that we go through, and I mean, and you've got a great deal of experience sitting around the table.
Yeah.
When you draw something like this together, both in and out of the construction field, and I appreciate their wisdom in this matter moving forward, so regardless of how it plays out, it's, I trust they consciously made the right decision, so with that, I think we end this meeting.